remove any discussion of sex and sexuality until puberty. Simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know anything about sex until I was about getting ready to bust a nut. You know, I mean, for real. I mean, I don't know. I didn't know much about it.
As a matter of fact, this is what's so crucial. And every predator,
but as a young boy, I liked females, but I didn't. You know, they were just cute, and I was interested in, you know, being cute around them. I wasn't looking to. I didn't know anything about bedding a woman. I mean, who the fuck? You know, that's what they're trying to teach kids, you know, to have intercourse and have some kind of sexual stimulation between children. I mean, this is fucking absurd.
Right. I'm
still looking for my first stimulating experience. I mean, I'm just trying.
Right. My contention is this, and it's normal human development. You leave a kid alone. You don't introduce anything to do with sex and sexuality, and he or she will not have a sexual thought until puberty because it doesn't enter their mind.
But here, let me cut you there. So why are these schools, these principals, the Board of Education allowing teachers that aren't licensed therapists to teach these kids their own agendas of the sexuality? And just recently, there was a black gentleman that went to school. His child, I think, was 3 years old. The teacher was putting dresses on his son.
Yeah. And
it was all over the internet. And he said, "Why are you?" And she goes, "I'm not answering you." Now,
imagine that.
He's there to go to school, preschool, school. Why are they not being sued? And this should be sexually inappropriate, right?
Because it should be a crime.
It should be a crime. That's
it's child abuse, child neglect.
Yes. Why isn't there more lawsuits against these teachers that have no right? They're there as licensed teachers.
ABCs. What the hell happened to math?
Art, math, science,
history.
Why are they bringing them into this?
Reading.
Or why are they putting up flags of any country and trying to push the agenda of wars or this and that? Where does this come into this? And why aren't they being sued for it? Why aren't they being arrested for it?
Yeah. I think it speaks to the power of the trans pushers. This is a massive industry now. Again, when you look at the pharmaceuticals, this is worldwide, you're into the trillions of dollars. This, as a matter of fact, a couple of stats. In 2007, there was one gender clinic in the US. By 2018, okay, so 11 years later, there were 30. But then 2 years later, there were 200. This all
happened. This all happened with the, and I don't want to throw names around inappropriately, but I think it was a Chelsea in the Marines or the military. Manning, it was the name Manning. She slash it was a spy. You familiar with what I'm talking about?
A little bit.
And they were sentenced to 30 years. And then Obama let him or her after 7 years. In fact, I just saw something about that on the news not too long ago, that was around 2005, 2006-ish. Whenever Obama was in charge, he was accused of spying, some kind of spying, sending documents to either Russia or something like that. And yeah, I think it was Russia. And then Snowden ended up going to Russia, but he was this Chelsea Manning was before Snowden ran to Russia. But that was sort of out in front. It was this military man, and then they started juxtaposing to a female position. And it was so prevalent that I think that had a lot to do with this whole movement. And that was brought out during the Obama. Would that be around the right time that this thing started to change? And here's a guy who said a marriage is between a man and a woman. Remember?
Yeah, Obama said it in 2008.
To get elected or something.
But I'm going to tell you something. See, you know, we're big advocates for inner cities. And because we come from there, where he worked there. And the thing is, when you're manipulating kids, that we don't have the same opportunities as, you know, where we're growing up, a lot of broken families, a lot of, you know, poor families where I grew up. So I think the manipulation is starting in these inner cities. And for some reason, they're trying to take advantage of these kids. And I'm a big advocate for these kids to, you know, I try to push the other way. Don't let people manipulate you in any which direction, not just this sexually. I'm talking about financially, criminally, anything, because we seem to be used as the group to be pawns for the government's agenda. And, you know, people say, well, you're paranoid. No, I'm not. I mean, all you got to do is turn on the news and look what goes on and what they're doing to these kids. And, you know, so I'm constantly advocating for better chances for these kids for a better life. And that doesn't mean handouts, because I'm not a big advocate of handouts. I think handouts is another manipulation to keep them down.
Right.
So I'm not a big advocate, but I am an advocate for them to have freedom of thinking, freedom of choice, freedom of opportunities, second chance programs that we talk about, guys that are in prison that, you know, the system's manipulated. And I'm not saying everybody in prison's such a great guy, but give them a chance to recover their
They
lives.
don't make them come out at minimum wage,
Yeah.
which is this, because who the hell wants to?
So,
I spent 12 years in prison. I come out and start at minimum wage somewhere. You think I want to hang out there?
and by the way, I just got to mention something, John. Benny Gerentano was in, a friend of mine. He's in the penitentiary. Hogle, the acting governor of New York, is supposedly considering clemency for him. So for people that know Benny Gerentano, please sign in petitions for him so I can get it over to the governor or the acting governor to see if we can get him released, where I believe he was falsely charged. So anybody that knows who Benny is in Brooklyn and the neighborhoods, please support him. Please sign in, send it into our website, johnelite.com.
Where can somebody find out the truth about his situation just before we go into something else? In other words, why would I want to sign on for clemency for Benny? Just because I want, just so people would understand quickly.
Because the paperwork, we did a couple shows on him, the paperwork of him being convicted wrongfully, falsified evidence, people that were told to go cooperate, that were told by different.
So we have evidence, if people want to see it,
yes,
of him being falsely accused and then incarcerated.
correct.
Okay, that's important to know, because just because, you know, we don't, people know that's an injustice. No matter, I don't care if you killed someone yesterday, but being put in prison for this killing that you didn't do is just not fair. You can't, like I said earlier, you can't defend yourself against the indefensible, because you have no way, you know, to prove your innocence in this country other than hope that the person that's lying looks like a liar.
John, how many programs and how many days a week do you have these classes for these people that been involved in predatory acts, I guess?
I currently have 2 groups. The rest of the day, I end up doing regular kind of what I call regular kind of counseling.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite a shift, because a lot of the folks I deal with have been sexually victimized. And then I shift to doing a couple of groups with the victimizers. So it can be interesting.
Do they tell you, do you have like, first off, are these in person or are these by Zoom?
Right now it's by Zoom because of the COVID stuff. But while I was in prison, of course, meaning on psych staff, that was obviously in person as we had our groups.
Okay. Do you discuss some of the reasons why they commit these crimes? And do they talk about how they manipulate kids to trust them? Do they get into some of this so we can understand,
you know, in the parole
kids, some of these signs?
Yeah, in the parole groups, it's a little bit different, because there isn't quite the ability to bring the kind of pressure to bear in a way. Plus, you know, in a prison, as you know, you can monitor everything. You can, while a guy's in group, I can have his cell being searched. And the guys that tended to be the best were the pedophiles.
Right.
They knew how to manage, talk about impression management. So they're the best in the class. And meanwhile, I've asked for an officer to go search his cell. And of course, what do we find?
Right.
So you can't do that. And that's why.
So what do we find? Tell me what we find.
Oh, you find all sorts of kitty pictures.
Give me an example.
Well, you find they've cut out pictures of magazines of kids in underwear. They've also, on occasions, have manipulated, or on occasion, they've manipulated relatives or friends of friends to actually get pictures of their victims.
I was in Hillsborough County. I'll tell you a story. It's very hard for me to feel bad for these guys, illness or not. I was in Hillsborough County.
Well, it's not an illness.
Oh, it's not.
No.
It's just a mental. What is it?
No, it's the result. Here's my own bias. Here's my own take on it. Not just take on it, but here's the reality, that none of these guys started with child porn. Right? They'll tell you, but these are the world's greatest liars. They all started with adult porn. It was introduced to them. Now, this is different than child-on-child offending, if any of these guys were perped on. And if you want to study the effects of child abuse, meaning guys that were perped on, you don't go to the sex offender unit, by the way. You go to the drug and alcohol unit.
Right, right.
If somebody makes it to adulthood, right? If somebody makes it to adulthood.
No, that's because they were masking their pain by using drugs and alcohol.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
There you go. So and here's one red flag of a predator, or for somebody to be mindful of. Not just they spend a whole lot of time around other people's kids. So that's a red flag. Whether in church, if you see a man hanging around a bunch of kids, that's a red flag. And you actually need to go up to him and tell him two things. Hey, I notice you're around a lot of kids. Are you aware of this day and age? It's probably not a good thing. And come on over with us men, join our conversation. Okay, right. So if you see an adult hanging around with a lot of kids, that's a red flag. No adults.
Well, John, I was in Hillsborough, and I was finished. I'll give you a quick story. And a guy comes in, seemed like a nice guy, regular guy, skinny guy. He's on a telephone. He asks me for a pen. I give him a pen. Talking to him for a couple of minutes. I sit down. I'm talking to him again. And on the second tier, my friend Otis Davis was a real good friend of mine. He shows me a newspaper from the second tier, and he's like, "Look at it." And I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Look at it." He drops it down to me, and I read it. And the guy I'm talking to, who I thought was a nice guy, educated, well-spoken, was babysitting his good friend, a girl's 2-year-old and 3-year-old, boy and girl, and he was raping them on a regular basis.
That's right.
So now I get a mop handle, right? He's sitting down, and I put the mop handle across his head. Right? And before I put the mop handle across his head, without mentioning the officer's name in the block, I told him, I says, turn around and look the other way for a minute. Now, he knows who the guy is. And the officer complied. He looked the other way. And, it's all on camera anyway. It doesn't matter. Those pods are all on camera. And I put the mop handle across his head a couple of times. So the problem is this. I'm an average individual inmate that most of us will do the same thing that are in there. How do you not do that to these guys, knowing they're harming a 2- and 3-year-old like that for the rest of their lives? How do you restrain you? How do you even talk to somebody to say, because the way we think when you're hurting a child is they should lose their life, really. I mean, I didn't go to that extreme, but I know people want to go to that extreme with them. How do you feel bad for them not to go to that extreme? How do you deal with somebody that's, I don't think is curable from what we understand, right? Do you believe in castration of these kind of guys if it's not curable?
It won't work.
Because they'll still offend.
Correct. And that's what people need to understand. That topic came up, by the way. And first of all, John, your response, the public needs to know what you just said. It puts to end the myth of MAPS, minor attracted persons. Okay. Unfortunately, within the realm of sex offender treatment, things have shifted to the belief, and it's gotten into the literature. And how did it get in the literature? By perps themselves, that a man, if he's perping on a kid, he more than likely was perped on himself. So now that's urban legend. It is not true. How do you know? Because the guys in prison wouldn't be targeted, especially by other sex offenders. Everybody knows, right? There ain't no secrets in prison, and everybody knows truth. And so if it was true these guys were perped on, then in a way there'd be some empathy on the block for these guys. But everybody knows what it takes to become a child predator, which is a lot of work and a lot of stair-step fashion downwards in terms of what they're consuming and what they're looking at. It takes a lot of work to change your mind in such a way that you find a child and they don't find them attractive. And here's what people need to understand. No man is attracted to a child's body. Doesn't work. Okay.
And
what they're attracted to.
What is it about?
I'll tell you. Ready? Because there's a twisting like effect. The further somebody goes into deviance, and you look at the kind of porn, you can track it. The porn will progressively become worse, and the public needs to know before a guy offends a child, he gets into bestiality. 100% of the time. You look up on the internet, bestiality and child porn in offenses, and you're always going to find it. That's how vile these guys are. What drives them to offend is not the body, it's the effect.
You don't even want to look it up, though. People look it up because they don't think you're involved.
Oh, no. Don't go in anywhere weird. Just do a simple Google search. That's a challenge. I never go anywhere on my computer. I just do Google searches. But if you look up man arrested with child porn and bestiality, look at how many stories come up. Okay, I did not know until I had access to all the files.
But why do they take it to the next level, some of these guys, and they kill these children?
Correct. Oh, yeah. No, that's right. But what's interesting is this. Child predators are so far down in terms of deviance that, and this speaks to what you brought up, part of the challenge when I was working in the institution doing sex offender treatment is I had to keep 3/4 of the group from killing the child predators. Right?
Yeah, I don't know if I could sit there listening to them tell a story without hurting them.
Okay, there we go. And so the question is, even among sex offenders, why is it that 3/4 of them want to hurt those that have hurt children? Because everybody knows everything in terms of sex offense moves downward initially. And it stops at, it's like an hourglass. It's very interesting. I didn't know this until really doing a deep dive into all this stuff. It moves downward. So we'll take the gateway porn, used to be Playboy, right? And so eventually it starts to progress, Penthouse, Hustler. Now it's going to start to get more graphic. Now you start to get the dominance issue, but eventually the age and stage of the women that are featured gets younger. And the younger kids look older, and it all comes down to barely legal. I had never heard that term until work, right? And there's actually a magazine started by a woman, sold to Hustler. Go figure. Okay. So what I saw,
I've never seen that magazine, but maybe I have. I'm not sure.
Yeah, don't you know?
Barely legal.
I went in your closet. I seen Hustle all over your closet.
Hustle my ass.
Okay.
That's
No,
old
no,
school.
no. Too much.
Actually worth some
Okay,
money
no,
now.
no.
Hustle.
So what you'll find is inevitably every sex offender went down to barely legal, but it sounds funny, but the legitimate guys, doesn't that sound, I'm so warped now, I call them legit.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Right? But the legitimate guys get shocked and they back up in terms of age.
Right.
The pedophiles kept going, not because they were addicted. There's a big difference between a porn addiction. I work with men that are porn addicted as well, versus deviance.
Do you have a business card?
I don't, but you can go under survive. Oh, okay.
Can you go on the web? How do you find you? Seriously, now that we said that, people want to find you.
Oh, survivorsupport.net. There's a contact box. So survivorsupport.net, they can reach out to me.
Hit the subscribe button, follow John, and any questions, again, send your questions in.
Yeah.
There you go. As a matter of fact, on the website under the Insights tab, Insights 1, I specifically made, there's 3 tabs. One is the difference between sex addiction versus predation. If you want to know the difference, and in a nutshell, it's simply this: somebody that has a sex addiction applies the brakes. Somebody that's a predator never applied the brakes. Okay. Then I have 2 tabs called Porn and Dark Deviance 1 and 2. I wanted people to learn what I learned, because after hours, when you're in the hole, you hear a whole lot of stuff. That's where and if you're there, no psych staff spends any time, right? I spent a lot of time, because not only did I care, and I'd bring stuff for the guys to read.
Unfortunately, we spent years in solitary confinement, so you know that we understand solitary.
So you probably saw a psych staff come on, get in, and get out.
Oh, they just come for a second.
Are you okay?
There you go.
All right,
how you doing? You okay? Okay, you okay?
Okay, that's right. That drove me nuts.
Yeah, it's nonsense.
That's why I can tell you I've accrued more clinical contact hours in prison than any other, as far as solitary, than any other psych staff, because I would come equipped with reading material, some of my own charts, and I would talk to the guys. And then guys that weren't on my list, as I was walking out, if somebody called to me, unlike all the other psych staff, they'd say, "You're not on my list," they walk out.
Right.
I would turn around. And you know what? And what's important as well for people that either don't or know about prison, or maybe they do, got to understand that there are people, there are inmates that actually care about one another. And so as I was on the unit, I would have a number of inmates say, Mr. Euler, you know what, the other psych staff didn't stop, but I think guy in 32A, I think he really needs to talk to you. So I'd go over and talk.
Well, everybody's got this belief that all the inmates are garbage and shit.
No,
And
that's
it's
right.
not true.
That's right.
Honestly,
No.
is 90% of the guys in there aren't bad guys, decent guys who are trying to make a fast buck. They either had a drug problem. They're not the degenerates that everybody thinks they are.
right.
There's 10%, obviously,
That don't
like anything else.
that don't belong on the street.
Yeah, they don't belong anywhere.
Right.
But,
No, that's
you know,
right.
you still have a lot of good human beings in there that screw up their lives, and young guys that are, you know, trying to hustle through
Choices.
And as
Choices
they
have
get old-
consequences,
Yeah.
and some of us just don't feel the consequences until it happens, and then
That's right.
reality
Let-
hits.
John,
You knew he
let
was
me-
going to cut
let me
me off
mention this.
eventually, John. It just happened.
I have to say something on this show.
Well, yeah,
You haven't been complimented my blue blazer.
I like
here.
it. I actually like the blue blazer, and it matches with your white hanky and your
I
shirt.
didn't put that in. It came with the hanky.
Yeah, I know it did.
That's nice. John, let me mention this just to finish one thing that I left hanging out there, which is as far as believing, because it's gotten in the literature. Why? Because academic researchers have spent months trying to get into be able to interview guys, and so they either hand select or they put a notice on the block. Listen, the researcher's going to be in there, so they talk to 3 or 4 guys, and then they go and write literature, right? They write their research findings, and that eventually gets into affecting the law, by the way. But the difference between, or how I can tell you that guys that have been perped on, they do not go on to perp if they've never had any other offense. Now, let me define what I just said. You can see if somebody has been the victim of child-on-child offense because somewhere between kindergarten and high school, they will either act out or act in. You cannot tell me a child can sit on that degree of emotion and be normal or average. So you will have, if somebody was perped on and now is acting out, you will see a paper trail and they will have problems. If an adult who has no paper trail, and it's up to the adult that's a perp to prove this, because they'll say, oh, I was in counseling. Really? Find one iota of evidence that you won't.
Right.
So if you have an adult that harmed a child,
right,
who made it into adulthood, who everybody was surprised that he was arrested, and that's what you look for, okay? That means he was socially adept. He held down a job. He didn't look normal. Yet when he gets in there, he will say he was perped on by a kid. Yet he has no evidence
right,
of any kind of mental health treatment. They'll all say they sought out counseling. That's a bunch of BS. They sought it out once they were arrested
right.
as damage control. So if somebody tries to tell you that they were perped, a man who perped on a kid tries to tell you they themselves were perped on, but they made it into adulthood unscathed, they're lying through their teeth. Victims and survivors become protective of kids, not exploitive. And that's my concern about the trans deception, because the trans deception is looking for kids. There are about 4 populations within the trans movement that comprise, I think, about 80% of the kids. It's my subjective stat, okay? You have sexual abuse victims. Predators can spot those kids a mile away because they have difficulty with their intuition, hence boundary issues. So they look for kids that are already sexually abused. They look for kids on the autism spectrum. Why? Because those kids have a hard time with their intuition and they don't know when they're being groomed and when their boundaries are being crossed. They look for kids in the foster care system. Why? The vast majority of those kids have already been perped on and they're easy targets for predators to come along and groom. And then kids being groomed on social media. So you take the kids that are in the trans movement, and they're all being groomed. They've all been manipulated with the most sophisticated of cult-like techniques that you will find. It's a combination of what's employed in Scientology and what Keith Raniere was doing in NXIVM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my
We
concern.
talk about the Scientology.
Right. So when you have an adult, and here was my concern about Ashley. Okay, I'll tell you why men are dressing in drag to get on swim teams or any sport, any female sports. I'll tell you exactly why. And all the sex offenders know this. They want access to the locker rooms and showers. It's not about the medals. These guys are deviant. And you want to find out? You prevent them from taking their cell phone, their camera cell phones in with them to the locker room, and you watch them scream. That's why these guys are getting into women's sports, because they've gotten so far into deviant porn that now they have a malevolence toward women and they're toying with the women. They don't care about beating women in sports.
Yeah, what kind of medal is that?
That's just the precursor to the prize.
Yeah,
their gold medal is making it. As a matter of fact, right? As a matter of fact,
behind what you're saying.
Okay, as a matter of fact, online, you look at pictures of women that transition to men, and you will be hard pressed to find any that are standing in a restroom taking a picture of themselves. It's the guys that take pictures. Why? Because they are preening.
Right.
They've accomplished it.
Right.
They're in there with their phones. What do you think they're doing with their phones?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. They're taking pictures and they're uploading them. These guys are bad news. And if any of them want to debate, I've got a program they can come on, because they're not going to touch this issue, because the dirty little secret behind all of this is porn. These guys are deeply steeped in porn. Now, am I saying that every guy in the trans movement is a predator? Absolutely not. But those that want to access kids and influence them, I want a search of their internet.
Right.
And I'll tell you what, every one of them have is a VPN.
Yeah. He's got a point there, and I'm not defending anybody, but in the case of Ashley, I think that you seem to think that there's some gray area there with her, and I'm going to give you that as an expert.
But I don't know. I don't know Ashley at all.
But I don't think she's interested in young people.
No.
Right. So that's why.
But Ashley defended. Hold on. But here's a concern. Ashley defended men accessing women's restrooms and the restrooms of kids, and he said.
Kids?
All we want to do is pee in private, in peace. No, you don't. If you want to pee in peace, you go to the guy's restroom. This day and age, nobody's going to say anything. Don't invade female.
Well, here's what
spaces.
I said, John. Here's what I don't understand. Have like we always did: boys' room, girls' room,
there you go.
Everybody's room. So everybody has a choice. Now, the people I did speak to that transition, they said, well, that leaves them in limbo forever. They want to go and be a normal woman or man. And by having an everybody room, they never get to be that full transition. Now, I'm no expert, so I'm listening to opinions.
That's an odd statement, though.
Back and forth.
Who gives a shit where you shit piss?
Again, what I'm worried about is not the average person. I'm worried about the offenders that are hurting kids or trying to kill kids. How do we deal with convicted people, individual adults that have raped children or in the past may have killed children and got back out of jail? How do you deal with them? If there is no cure to them, what's your suggestion? I was in a jail called Falkenberg in Florida also. And I was in a solitary cell. It was glassed out cell. It's for high profile inmates. From what I was told back then, this is going back 15, 20 years, that they were going to make that a unit with all child predators that have been arrested. Now, if you got them in a unit because they protect them because they can't get into regular jails, so guys will hurt them or kill them. I mean, not like the old days, they would have killed them faster than they do now. But what is the answer to these people if they're not curable? What's your suggestion? What do you do with them?
What I do with them is I apply a very unapologetically, I apply a holistic approach, which also includes faith-based. I always want to believe with the guys that I'm working with. Now, it may not sound like that because I tend to be a firebrand, but I'm a firebrand when it comes to protecting women and children. What a guy does in his own private life is fine. Stay away from kids. It's very simple.
Right.
With those that have harmed kids, of course, you have all the criteria now. They need to be X number of feet away from schools and all that.
Yeah, that don't work. I'm talking about maybe chemically tell them instead of doing 20 years, we'll give you 15, but you need to take these drugs and whatever chemicals and drugs.
It won't stop them because, again, child offenders are not, they don't lust after the bodies of kids like we lust after adults. They don't. It's not about the body. It's about having an effect. That's what deviance is. And matter of fact, think about this. A normal guy, and when I was dealing with the sex offenders, it really hit home. Once I figured this out, now sex offender treatment was productive. For an average guy, he cannot, we'll get graphic here for a second, but he cannot get an erection if he doesn't know that his partner is not enjoying herself. That's why the highest paid prostitutes know how to fake it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have
Yeah.
to be relaxed and you have to care that your partner is enjoying herself.
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's true.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
What happens to a guy where he can get it up knowing he's traumatizing her? That's not normal anymore. His brain has become psychopathic.
Right.
There really is a psychopathic brain. You violate your conscience long
So
enough, and
spanking
any of
someone
us,
on the ass and all that other stuff is not.
Yeah, stop spanking me. It
There's
doesn't
no more
work.
spanking.
No more spanking.
no, listen, that listen, Dave,
I mean,
Okay,
we're
but,
adults. He's
but-
allowed to spank me. if
I'm
he
not.
wants. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm tired.
It's okay.
My hands are killing me. You take a good beat.
I don't know. He told me last night I'm a
Takes a
bad
good
boy.
beat,
I don't
you
know.
son of a
Why
bitch.
were you saying that? I was a little drunk.
okay, moving along. But if you get to a child, there's nothing about a child's body that is attractive. And
No,
all the guys, once they know you're onto them. So the reality is this: they are not turned on by a child's body. They're turned on by the idea that they can perpetrate lifelong trauma. They can despoil, as they say over in Europe. They are harming a child. They're traumatizing a child. They're terrorizing a child and leaving a lasting impact. That's what they're getting off on.
So what I'm hearing in my layman's term is they like the abuse part. They like abusing powerful, hurt. It's almost as if they wouldn't mind stabbing and gutting people. That's
That's right. That's why they
So-
use objects.
So, John,
if you
so when I
castrate them, they'll
traumatized
still
the
use
guy,
objects.
John, when I try, and I mean serious, when I traumatized the guy and put a pipe across his head or a broomstick, or we killed the other guy that raped and beat the girl. I mean, I hate to say this because I'm not justifying the violence and I don't want to justify it, but they deserve it. I mean, I don't know. I know you can't really say that. And I shouldn't say that because I'm on a different plane in my life,
No,
but I don't know what else to say
but
about
that's
these
what
guys.
they're doing.
If
Right?
that's what they're doing to somebody else, and they're doing it to people that can't fight back.
I mean, it's not a
It's
sexually enticing thing. A little child. I mean, the fuck is it's not.
Right. And
That's
that's
not what
why
we're
it's a
designed.
lie.
We're not designed that way.
That's why. So that's why it's a lie to say that pedophiles were always attracted. They're not attracted to kids.
I didn't know
That is a
that.
lie
Yeah.
from pedophiles. They get off on traumatizing a
Driving
child.
yourself
I'll tell you what, in the Old Testament, you didn't have a lot of emphasis on therapy, and I'll tell you why. A pile of rocks on top of a perpetrating body was really clarifying for the survivor, and that took care of years worth of therapy.
Yeah.
Well, they say the men that are predating on women that rape them and beat them when they're begging, that's the worst thing you can do because that's what they get off on, right? Before they kill them or
Yeah,
torture
some.
them or whatever.
And to
Yeah.
show you how bad the predators are, when you look at the serial rapists and murderers, the Bundys, we can name them, Hillside Strangler, and
Jeffrey Dahmer.
right.
Yeah.
You won't find any kids among their victims. BTK, right, had a couple of victims, but they were in the way. That shows you how bad a child predator is. You got to
Yeah.
understand, right? People have to understand. I would
Yeah,
have
well,
trusted
Bundy
this.
only killed girls that were 8s and up to 10. He liked it the best.
Okay.
Beautiful women.
Yeah, beautiful woman. He
Yeah.
was a nut. Like he.
Okay, but that's why. So people need to understand how bad pedophiles are. On that level of twistedness, pedophiles are underneath serial rapists and murderers.
Hey,
So is
John,
there any hope?
we got a minute. We got
Yeah.
a minute left. We got to wrap up, but I don't want to cut you
wait,
off.
no,
Love to have you back
I
on, but
wanna
wait, you can ask. Stop. I'm cutting you off. All right.
Around.
Yeah, John, let him go and then you go and we'll have to wrap it up. And we'd love to have you back is what I was going
I
to say.
want to know what you think is the most deprivative situation that you've encountered, whether it was someone was like the sexual deviance that created the worst image that you could tell us about, one, and two, anything else that you think you need to impart on us?
The worst kind of stuff is satanic ritual abuse. Where
So that would include give me an example, because I don't know anything about this.
where you gang rape a child and she's tied down in the middle of a pentagram, and you use items and animals and stuff.
And this is what they do. These people that you've spoken to or dealt with.
I've worked with survivors. I haven't worked with anybody that's been found that's done the SRA stuff.
So you've worked with surviving children that survived that abuse.
Say it again, sorry.
You've worked with children that have been tied down and abused this way.
Yeah, I've worked with adults. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that were tied down as children.
Correct.
Wow.
So they made it to adulthood. So,
and they have, shall we say, multiple parts to themselves. Absolutely. It's very real. It's very, very
detached. They detach a lot.
Terrible. Suffer, I guess.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point out one thing. As a cop in Brooklyn, I arrested a 12-year-old boy for sexually violating a 6-year-old boy. And I didn't know if I hated this 12-year-old or not, but I didn't like him.
But he was probably perped on. That child was probably perped on.
That we discovered he was more than likely abused by a stepfather or something like that in the household.
So child on child is very different than the guys that we're talking about.
Yeah, right. No, I'm just saying that this is part of what like that. I have these images in my head of that moment, and the 6. I mean, I want to cry.
So, John, now you're in Pennsylvania, you said?
Actually, South Carolina now.
We'd love to have you in studio one day. You know, whenever, if you're ever up this way.
Or down in Florida, if you go to Florida at all. Yeah.
And stay a little longer with you, because this is incredibly interesting and helpful for the people out there that are listening to this. You're an encyclopedia of knowledge, really. And, it's terrible what's going on. So, we really appreciate having you. And again, one more time, if somebody's looking for you.
Survivorsupport.net, or if they want to tune into the counseling program, it's Journey to Healing, Friday nights, 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on CETNTV.com. That's my
everybody. Thanks for joining us on the John Elite Show, the mob, the mafia, and the man. If you can reach us on True John Elite on my Instagram, you can reach us on johnelite.com. On our website, books, clothing, sunglasses, a lot of memorabilia that we sell there. Mike Dowd.
Mike Dowd on Instagram, Twitter, and Michael Dowd on Facebook. Just hit us up, private message us if there's any questions or concerns. Legitimate things, not for a date, please.
Hit the subscribe button.
Unless,
and ask as many questions as you want, please. We'd love to hear from you so we can forward them over to John. It's an incredible subject, and remember, this is about our kids, our future.
On that one for a moment there, but thanks, and remember, you did.
Yes, I did. Change my life. Yes, I did. Hashtag it. And for you people out there, you can always change your life, go in the right direction. If you want freedom, you got to live a good life.
Great conversation, John. Thank you so much. I can't believe we got
John. Really appreciate your work. Honestly, it's incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks.
New York City.